The morning sun cast long shadows across the wheat fields of New Haven as James Stone walked through his farm. His old boots left prints in the soft dirt while he checked the growth of his crops. At 73, his hair had turned white as snow, but his back remained straight, a reminder of his 40 years in the military. "Mr. Stone, Mr. Stone," a young voice called out from behind him. Stone turned to see Tommy, one of the colony kids, running toward him with a tablet in hand. "Slow down there, son," Stone said with a smile. "The crops aren't going anywhere." Tommy stopped, catching his breath. "I got my test results back from the Defense Academy entrance exam." His eyes shone with excitement. Stone's weathered face brightened. He had been helping Tommy study for months. "Well, don't keep an old man waiting. I passed. Top marks in strategy and tactical analysis." Tommy practically bounced as he showed Stone the tablet. Stone looked at the results, his chest swelling with pride. This was why he had chosen to settle on New Haven after retiring. Here, he could pass on his knowledge to the next generation without the weight of stars on his shoulders. The colony of New Haven sat at the edge of human space, just 3 light years from the border of the Crimson Empire. Most people would consider this too close for comfort, but Stone had picked this place carefully. The Empire's expansion patterns suggested they wouldn't bother with such a small farming colony, and the fertile soil made it perfect for agriculture. As Stone and Tommy walked back toward the main settlement, they passed other farmers tending their fields. The morning air was filled with the soft hum of farming drones and the distant sound of the colony's fusion plant. It was a peaceful life, far from the tense meetings and battle plans that had consumed Stone's previous career. "Tell me, Tommy," Stone said as they reached his front porch, "what would you do if you had to defend a colony like ours?" Tommy's face scrunched up in thought. This was one of Stone's favorite teaching methods, turning everyday situations into tactical exercises. "Well, we're too small for a major military presence," Tommy began. "But we could set up early warning systems disguised as weather satellites, and maybe hide some automated defense platforms in the asteroid belt." Stone nodded approvingly. "Good thinking. But what's your most important asset?" "The people," Tommy answered without hesitation. "A defense is only as strong as the people manning it." "Exactly." Stone sat down in his old rocking chair, one of the few things he brought from Earth. "That's why I spend so much time teaching you kids. Knowledge and preparation are better shields than any battleship." A notification flashed on Tommy's tablet. More colony news. Stone watched the boy's face as he read it. The tensions with the Crimson Empire had been growing lately, but out here, it felt distant, like storm clouds on a far horizon. "They say the Empire's been moving ships closer to the border," Tommy said, looking worried. Stone reached out and patted the boy's shoulder. "The Empire's been flexing its muscles for centuries. They're like a big dog that barks at everything, but rarely bites. They know that attacking any human settlement would bring the full force of the defense fleet down on them." Tommy seemed reassured, but Stone's eyes drifted to the sky. He had spent enough years in command to know that peace was as fragile as morning frost. Still, he had chosen this life precisely because it was different from his past. Here, he could watch things grow instead of planning how to destroy them. "Come on," Stone said, standing up. "Let's check on the north field. Those corn stalks won't tend themselves, and while we work, I'll tell you about the time I had to evacuate an entire space station using nothing but cargo ships and good timing." As they walked toward the north field, Stone felt content. He had traded his general's stars for a farmer's tools, and he hadn't regretted it for a moment. New Haven was exactly what its name promised, a place of new beginnings, where even an old warrior could find peace. Little did he know that the peace he had found would soon be shattered, and his final lesson would teach humanity not about farming, but about vengeance. The attack came during the harvest festival. New Haven's twin moons hung low in the purple evening sky as the colony celebrated another successful growing season. Children ran between food stalls while adults chatted and laughed, their faces lit by strings of colored lights stretched between buildings. Stone sat at a wooden table, watching Tommy demonstrate a tactical simulation game to younger kids. The boy had received his acceptance to the Defense Academy that morning, and his excitement was contagious. A smile crossed Stone's weathered face as he took a sip of coffee. The first warning came from old habits. Stone noticed the stars disappearing, one by one, as ships dropped out of hyperspace above the colony. His military instincts, dormant but never gone, screamed danger. Everyone inside. Stone's voice cut through the festival noise. People turned to look at him, confused. Now, the colony's warning sirens began to wail moments later. Stone was already moving, his mind switching back to combat mode with practiced ease. Tommy, get the children to the shelter beneath the school. Red beams of energy sliced through the evening sky. The Crimson Empire's ships, sleek, angular vessels that looked like predatory fish, descended through the atmosphere. Their weapons targeted communication arrays first, then power stations. Stone ran to the colony's administrative building. Inside, panic had already taken hold. "Listen up," he shouted, his command voice cutting through the chaos. "This is a raid, not an invasion. They want to test our response times. Our priority is survival." Years of running evacuation drills kicked in. Colony officials began coordinating movements to the underground shelters. Stone organized teams to gather essential supplies and medical equipment. "Sir," a colony guard rushed in. "They're landing troops." Stone's mind raced. The colony's defenses were minimal, a few automated turrets and a small security force. They needed time. "Get everyone underground. I'll delay them." Outside, armored figures marched through the streets. Their helmets had swept back crests, marking them as Crimson Empire shock troops. Stone watched from shadows as they methodically searched buildings, their weapons charged. He knew what they were doing. This was a terror tactic. Hit a soft target, create fear, test human resolve. The Empire had done this before to other species, but they had chosen the wrong colony this time. Stone moved quietly between buildings, using his knowledge of the settlement to stay hidden. He reached the colony's backup communications array, a small dish disguised as part of the irrigation system. Working quickly, he began transmitting an emergency signal on military frequencies. "This is General James Stone, retired. Authorization code Sigma 7 Delta 9. New Haven colony under attack by Crimson Empire forces. Civilian evacuation in progress. Request immediate." A blast of energy scorched the wall beside him. Stone turned to see 3 Imperial troops, their weapons aimed at his chest. "Step away from the transmitter, human," one ordered in accented standard English. Stone stood slowly, hands raised. "You've made a mistake attacking this colony. The mistake was yours, old man, living so close to Empire space." The leader gestured with his weapon. "On your knees." Stone remained standing. "I am General James Stone of the Human Defense Fleet. This attack is an act of war." The Empire troops paused. Their leader laughed. "A general, tending crops. Better still. Your death will send an even stronger message." "The message you'll send isn't the one you think," Stone said calmly. The leader raised his weapon. "Your species needs to learn its place. The Empire's reach is infinite, its power absolute." Stone's eyes were steel. "Then you should have studied your history better. Humanity doesn't respond well to threats." The energy blast lit up the night. Stone fell, but his last act was hitting the transmit button. His final message, along with the footage from his hidden wrist camera, would reach the defense fleet. As Stone's blood soaked into the soil he had tended for years, the Imperial troops moved on, unaware that they had just killed not just a farmer, but a legend. Unaware that their casual cruelty had lit a spark that would soon become an inferno. In the shelters below, Tommy held younger children close, tears streaming down his face as he watched the security feeds. He had just witnessed his mentor's execution, But he had also seen something else. Stone's final lesson in sacrifice and duty. The Empire thought they were sending a message of fear. Instead, they had written the first line of their own epitaph. General Maria Rivers stood motionless before the large view screen in her command center. The footage from Stone's wrist camera played for the third time. Her hands gripped the tactical table so hard her knuckles had turned white. "Play it again," she ordered, her voice steady despite the rage burning in her chest. "General," her aide said softly, "you've seen. Play it again." The footage started over. The festival. The attack. Stone's last moments. Rivers watched it all, committing every detail to memory. This wasn't just about revenge. She was learning. The Empire's tactics, their equipment, their arrogance. Stone had given them one final gift of intelligence with his death. Around her, the command center of the Human Defense Fleet's flagship hummed with activity. Reports streamed in from across human space as other colonies strengthened their defenses. The Empire's message had been received, but not in the way they intended. "What are your orders, General?" asked Colonel Reed, her tactical officer. Rivers finally turned from the screen. Her dark eyes held a cold fire that made even hardened veterans step back. "Get me the Defense Council. Now." Minutes later, the faces of humanity's military leadership appeared on the screen. Some showed anger, others fear. A few looked calculating, already thinking about appeasement. "Honorable Council," Rivers began, her voice carrying the weight of 40 years of service. "The Crimson Empire has executed a retired human defense fleet general on human soil. They've murdered civilians. They've broken the peace." "General Rivers," one counselor interrupted, "we must consider our response carefully. The Empire's military strength. The Empire's strength is based on fear and reputation." Rivers cut in. She pressed a button, and data streams appeared beside her. "This is General Stone's final gift to us. Years of analysis on Empire military doctrine, their command structure, their weaknesses. He didn't just farm on New Haven. He studied them." The council members leaned forward, examining the data. Stone had spent his retirement analyzing every available piece of information about the Empire. Their patrol patterns, their supply lines, their communication protocols. He had seen this coming. "I trained under General Stone for 20 years, Rivers continued. "He taught me that the biggest empires fall not through brute force, but through precision strikes at critical weaknesses. The Empire thinks they've shown their strength. Instead, they've exposed their greatest flaw, their arrogance." She brought up a tactical display of Empire space. "I'm not asking for permission to retaliate. I'm telling you my plan for victory." The council chamber fell silent. Rivers began laying out Operation Stonecutter, a campaign that would use the Empire's own rigid structure against them. Not a blind charge of vengeance, but a methodical dismantling of everything they held dear. "They expect us to either cower or rush in blindly," Rivers explained. "We'll do neither. We'll cut their supply lines, turn their tributaries against them, destroy their communication networks, make them feel fear in places they thought were safe." One counselor cleared his throat. "And the cost?" "Less than doing nothing," Rivers replied. "The Empire chose to make an example of a peaceful colony, of a man who had helped build the foundation of our fleet. Now they'll learn why that was their last mistake." The council deliberated for only 10 minutes. In the end, the vote was unanimous. Rivers received full authority to conduct her campaign as she saw fit. As the council members signed off, Colonel Reed approached her. "Where do we begin, General?" Rivers studied the star map, her finger tracing a path through Empire space. "We begin by being smarter than they expect. Prepare the fleet for immediate departure. Our first target isn't their military, it's their pride." She looked one final time at the paused image of Stone on the screen. In it, he stood tall despite facing death, showing the Empire the strength they had foolishly dismissed. "They wanted to show the galaxy their power," Rivers said quietly. "Instead, They're about to learn about ours. The Crimson Empire's largest fuel refinery on Nexus Station exploded on a quiet afternoon. No alarms had sounded. No human ships had been detected. One moment it was processing fuel for the Empire's warships. The next, it was an expanding cloud of debris. In her flagship's command center, General Rivers watched the explosion through the eyes of tiny stealth drones. "Confirm all worker evacuations," she ordered. "Confirmed, General," Colonel Reed reported. "Our infiltration teams triggered the emergency alarms 30 minutes before detonation." The station was empty. Rivers nodded. Stone's first lesson: destroy the enemy's resources, not their people. Make them fear their own weakness, not their adversaries' cruelty. Across Empire space, similar strikes occurred within the same hour. Supply depots discovered their inventories replaced with empty containers. Communication relays went dark. Trade ships arrived at their destinations to find their cargo holds filled with sand instead of valuable resources. In the Empire's Central Command, alarms blared as reports flooded in. The Supreme Commander of the Imperial Fleet, Lord Voss, struggled to make sense of the attacks. "How did they penetrate our defenses?" he demanded. "Where are their warships?" His subordinates had no answers. The humans weren't following any known pattern of warfare. There were no fleet movements, no massed attacks, no demands for surrender. Just precision strikes that disappeared like ghosts. Back on the human flagship, Rivers studied the tactical display. Red markers showed successful strikes, forming a pattern only she could see. "Begin Phase 2, she ordered. 12 hours later, the Empire's most secure military communication network crashed. When it came back online, every screen displayed the same message. Footage of Stone's execution playing on endless loop. "My lord," an Imperial officer reported to Voss, "we're receiving similar reports from all border sectors. The humans, they're not attacking our forces. They're attacking our supply lines, our infrastructure." Voss slammed his fist on his command throne. "Launch the Third Fleet. Crush their pathetic colonies. Show them the price of defiance." But when the Third Fleet jumped to their first target, they found empty space. The human colonies had vanished, leaving behind only automated defense platforms that broadcasted Stone's last words on all frequencies. In the officers' mess of her flagship, Rivers shared a quiet meal with her command staff. "Stone taught me that the Empire's greatest weakness is their predictability," she explained, cutting her food with methodical precision. "They expect grand battles, noble sacrifices, emotional responses, so we give them none of that. The hit-and-run tactics are working," Reed added, showing casualty reports. "We haven't lost a single ship, while their resource networks are in chaos." Rivers took a sip of water. Stone spent years studying their patrol routes, their response protocols, their chain of command. They never change, never adapt, because they've never needed to. A junior officer burst into the mess. "General, the Empire's Third Fleet has begun bombarding empty space in the Lewis sector." A small smile crossed Rivers' face. "Right on schedule. Their pride demands action, even when action is useless. Launch Phase 3. Across Empire space, hidden human agents activated their final protocols. In every major Imperial city, the public information networks began broadcasting evidence of corruption among high-ranking Imperial officials. Trade agreements revealing how the Empire's elite hoarded wealth. Security footage showing Imperial nobles abusing servant species. "Stone's last lesson," Rivers said softly. "The bigger they are, the more secrets they keep, and secrets, once exposed, cut deeper than any weapon." The Empire had expected a war of ships and soldiers. Instead, they got something far worse: exposure of their own rot, destruction of their own foundations, and the slow, methodical dismantling of everything they thought untouchable. And this was only the beginning. Lord Voss stood before the Emperor himself, his crimson uniform perfect despite the shadows under his eyes. The Imperial throne room stretched vast and golden around them, built to make visitors feel small. But today, it felt more like a cage. "You promised me results," the Emperor said, his voice carrying across the empty chamber. "Instead, I hear of chaos, of empty victories, of shadows striking where we are weakest." "My Emperor," Voss bowed deeper, "I have assembled our full fleet. Every warship, every carrier, every battle platform. We will crush these humans with overwhelming force." The Emperor's eyes narrowed. "All our ships. You risk everything on one battle." "The humans must commit their forces to defend their core worlds," Voss explained. "When they do, we will destroy them utterly. None will dare challenge the Empire again." In her command center, Rivers watched the massive Imperial fleet gathering. Her officers waited nervously for orders as more enemy ships appeared on their screens. "They've committed 90% of their total fleet strength," Reed reported. "Over 3,000 ships." Rivers nodded, studying the tactical display. "And their border defenses?" "Minimal. They've stripped everything for this attack." A small smile crossed Rivers' face, just as Stone predicted. "Their pride demands a grand victory. Contact our allies among the tributary species. It's time." The Imperial fleet moved like a tide of darkness across space, their ships' crimson markings creating rivers of red among the stars. Voss stood on his flagship's bridge, confident in his overwhelming strength. "Enemy fleet detected," his sensor officer reported. They're retreating, my lord." Voss leaned forward. "Pursue. They cannot escape the Empire's justice." The human fleet fled, taking seemingly random paths through space. The Imperial fleet split into pursuit groups, each following a different human squadron. Hours stretched into days as the chase continued. "My lord," Voss's communication officer interrupted his rest period. "Emergency transmissions from the core worlds." The tactical display lit up with alerts. While the Imperial fleet had been chasing human ships, other human forces had struck deep into poorly defended Imperial territory. But worse were the reports from tributary worlds. Entire species that had been bound to the Empire for centuries were declaring independence. Their own warships, hidden for years, were now attacking Imperial installations. Trade routes collapsed as former servants became enemies. "Impossible," Voss raged. "These lesser species wouldn't dare." But they had dared. Rivers had spent months in secret negotiations, promising freedom and protection to any who would turn against their Imperial masters. Now, with the Imperial fleet far from home, they struck. On her flagship, Rivers watched the Empire's carefully constructed hierarchy crumble. "Send word to our infiltration teams," she ordered. "Begin broadcasting the truth about New Haven to every world in Imperial space." Across thousands of planets, people watched Stone's execution. But they also saw what came before: the peaceful colony, the innocent civilians, the Empire's casual cruelty. Years of Imperial propaganda began to crack. "General," Reed reported, "the Imperial fleet is trying to turn back." "Too late," Rivers said softly. "Their fuel reserves are critical after the long pursuit. Their supply lines are cut. Their safe harbors are no longer safe." She touched the tactical display, where red dots showed Imperial ships scattered across space. They thought their mistake was leaving their core worlds undefended. But their real mistake was thinking that military strength alone makes an empire. The Empire had built itself on fear and pride. Now both weapons were being turned against them. Their greatest ships drifted in space, running out of fuel. Their most loyal subjects turned against them. Their darkest secrets lay exposed to the light. And somewhere, Rivers hoped, her old mentor was watching with approval as his final lessons were put into practice. The Imperial Palace shook as another explosion rocked the capital city. Emperor Vex stood at his grand window, watching his empire fall apart piece by piece. The once golden skies of the capital world were now filled with smoke and the flashes of weapons fire. "My Emperor," a guard rushed in, his armor scorched. "The blue species have taken control of the outer defense ring. The Green Alliance ships are moving into the inner system. We must evacuate you immediately." But the Emperor didn't move. Where is Lord Voss? Where is our fleet? Still scattered, my Emperor. Many ships have run out of fuel. Others are under attack by former tributary species. Communications are in chaos. In deep space, Rivers coordinated the final phase of Operation Stonecutter from her command center. The tactical display showed hundreds of Imperial ships sending surrender signals. Another group of Imperial destroyers is requesting safe harbor, Reed reported. Their crews are refusing orders to continue fighting. Rivers nodded. Direct them to the designated surrender points. Ensure they're treated with respect. She touched a control panel, bringing up footage from the Imperial capital. How many of their worlds have accepted our terms? 60% and rising, Reed answered. The Empire's structure is collapsing faster than we predicted. Their own noble houses are turning against each other. The Empire had always ruled through fear and division, keeping their subject species carefully balanced against each other. Now, with their military scattered and their secrets exposed, that same division was tearing them apart. On the Imperial capital world, Lord Voss stumbled into the throne room. His perfect uniform was now torn and stained. My Emperor, he gasped, we must consider the humans' terms. We cannot. Silence. The Emperor roared. We are the Crimson Empire. We do not surrender to lesser beings. My Emperor, Voss tried again. They're not acting like lesser beings. Every trap we've set, they've avoided. Every strength we've relied on, they've turned against us. That old man we killed, he taught them how to break us. A new explosion, closer this time, made the palace windows crack. Outside, crowds were gathering in the streets, not just former slaves and servants, but Imperial citizens themselves, demanding change. On her flagship, Rivers received a priority message. She read it twice, then turned to her staff. The Imperial Noble Council has voted to remove the Emperor. They're asking for terms. A cheer started to rise from her crew, but Rivers raised her hand. This isn't about celebration. This is about responsibility. Stone taught me that victory means nothing if you don't build something better from it. She brought up a document on the main screen, plans that Stone had written years ago, outlining how the Empire could be transformed from a tool of oppression into a federation of equals. Send word to all commands, Rivers ordered. Any Imperial force that surrenders is to be treated with full military honors. We're not here for revenge anymore. We're here to fulfill Stone's final vision. Across Imperial space, the message spread. The humans weren't demanding unconditional surrender. They weren't seeking to humiliate or destroy. Instead, they offered a path forward, one that Stone had mapped out during his quiet years of study. In the Imperial Palace, the Emperor watched as his own guards lowered their weapons. Outside, the sound of fighting was being replaced by something else. People celebrating in the streets. How? He whispered. How did they defeat us so completely? The answer came from an unexpected source, a message playing on every screen in the palace. It showed an old man tending crops on a distant world, teaching young people about peace and strategy, preparing for a future he wouldn't live to see. The Empire had killed a farmer, thinking him harmless. Instead, they had martyred a visionary whose death would transform the galaxy. 1 year after the fall of the Crimson Empire, General Rivers walked through the rebuilt fields of New Haven. The wheat stalks swayed in the breeze, just as they had when Stone tended them. New buildings stood where the Imperial forces had destroyed the old ones, and children played in the streets without fear. She stopped at a simple memorial in the town center. Stone's military medals were displayed behind crystal, next to a hologram showing him teaching local children. The inscription read, "They thought they killed a farmer. They never knew they killed a giant." General Rivers, a familiar voice called out. Tommy, now in his Defense Academy uniform, jogged up to her. He'd grown taller, more confident, but his eyes still held the same eagerness to learn. "Cadet," she smiled. "How are your studies?" "Top of my class in strategic theory," Tommy said proudly. "We're studying Operation Stonecutter now." Actually, that's why I wanted to talk to you. There's something I don't understand. They walked together through the settlement as Tommy asked his question. The final battle. There wasn't one. The Empire just fell apart. Was that really what you planned? Rivers stopped at the edge of a wheat field, running her hand along the stalks just as Stone used to do. Stone taught me that the greatest victories are the ones where you don't have to destroy your enemy. You just have to help them see a better path. In the distance, a ship descended through the atmosphere, one of the new joint patrol vessels, crewed by humans and former Imperial citizens working together. Its design combined human efficiency with Imperial aesthetics, a symbol of the changing times. The Empire didn't just fall, Rivers explained. It transformed. Stone spent years planning not just its defeat, but its rebirth. Every document we leaked, every secret we exposed, every ally we made. It was all to show people a different way forward. She pulled out a small data pad, showing Tommy the latest reports. The former Imperial worlds were holding their first free elections. Trade routes buzzed with ships from all species. Former enemies worked together in joint scientific ventures. But the cost, Tommy said softly, looking at Stone's memorial. Was it worth it? Rivers was quiet for a moment. Stone knew the risk when he settled here. He chose this place carefully, knowing that someday the Empire would make a mistake. His death sparked the change, but his life, his studying, planning, teaching, that's what made the change possible. They walked back toward the town center, where preparations were underway for the annual Harvest Festival. This year, representatives from 20 different species would attend, including former Imperial nobles who now served as diplomats. The Empire's greatest mistake, Rivers continued, wasn't killing Stone. It was believing that strength only comes from fear and dominance. Stone showed us, and now we've shown the galaxy, that true strength comes from understanding, cooperation, and patience. A group of children ran past them, playing with toy spaceships. Some were human, others were from former Imperial worlds, all laughing together. Above them, the setting sun painted the sky in shades of gold and purple. Your generation, Rivers said to Tommy, will build something better than either the Empire or the old human alliance. Something Stone saw coming, even if he didn't live to see it himself. She touched the memorial one last time before heading to her shuttle. There was still work to do, treaties to negotiate, reconstruction to oversee, balance to maintain. But Stone's lessons guided every step. Patience over anger, wisdom over force, growth over destruction. The Empire had wanted to send a message of fear. Instead, they had sparked a message of hope that would echo through the galaxy for generations to come. They had killed a farmer, but his harvest would feed the dreams of billions. And somewhere, Rivers liked to think, Stone was watching his final lesson unfold, that the greatest victory isn't destroying your enemy, but transforming them into friends.